Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really cool knife overview to share with you guys. This is a custom Direware S90. Holy cow, this thing is huge! And can you believe that firing power? I did not expect this when I unboxed this knife. Are you ready? Man, that is wild. Right off the bat, I'll tell you, this feels like a Medford Praetorian with something like zero tolerance flipping action. These guys, Direware knives, sorry, have been around for a while. I remember watching, the first video I ever saw on a Direware was probably in 2013, 2014 on Jim Skelton's channel, perhaps Terra Fanatic, two channels that I used to watch and honestly still watch. And I remember thinking, holy cow, that is awesome. This was during the craze of, massively overbuilt knives, which in a lot of ways is still very present, right? That's not necessarily gone, and I'm glad. I really personally like overbuilt knives just for the novelty of it. Obviously, it does create kind of an issue if you're going to use it, right? But this is absolutely a knife that is made to be used. You know, I know people are going to look at this and this is expensive. It's a custom knife, right? We're going to throw around terms like pocket jewelry or art knife. It's not actually meant to be used. There's a difference between an art knife that is just decorative, right, and it is actually very fragile, and a knife that is very, very expensive and looks amazing, but actually can be used. And this is definitely in that latter category. You can actually use this. Now, these knives are very difficult to get a hold of. You can't go to a retailer and just find one brand new, generally, where you can buy it. But Direware does actually have a few of their tail whip models at GP Knives right now at the time of this video, so I'll link Direware knives in general down below, but just so you guys know, you can actually pick up some tail whip models. These are expensive. This is a custom knife. If you're not familiar with my channel, the way that I handle custom knives is I do overviews, right? These are not necessarily designed to be the most optimal tools in every conceivable circumstance, right? Or in a lot of conceivable circumstances, much like, something like your Spyderco Para 3. This is designed to appeal to somebody, like a knife enthusiast who's looking for a very specific aesthetic, very specific elements right in their purchase. So, we're just going to talk about it. It's not really going to be a full review, just going to do kind of a show and tell and let you guys know what I know about this knife. Thanks so much, Ricky, for sending this in. Ricky's my buddy from the beginning of the channel, actually. He and I used to review knives out of the vehicles on the lot at the dealership that we worked at together. And he got into knives heavily, after I met him. And he actually picked this up, I believe, on the secondary market. How much do these guys cost? So I'm going to tell you guys right now, the guy who runs Direware is a little bit difficult to get a hold of. His Instagram is active. You can find him just by typing in Direware Knives on Instagram. And it shows that his most recent post was a couple of weeks ago, fairly active, and it does say that he's accepting custom orders. So, maybe it's something that, if you want to do a custom order, it's something that maybe you can do, right? They also have a website where they post, or he posts, knives that are for sale on the website periodically. But I actually had to contact GP Knives to find out what these things originally list for. Obviously, with custom knives, there are, more custom. I mean, on his Instagram, you can see that he's got, versions with mirror polished blades and Damascus and stuff that's going to cost way more money. But something like this, you're looking at titanium with a very interesting finish on it. We're going to talk about. We're looking at a compound. Obviously, this is a hand ground blade. We've got a compound ground stubby tanto. Hollow grind up front, flat down at the nose, and then it's two-tone. Very well done, by the way. It's very beautiful. Something like this is probably going to run about $1,200. I've seen them on the secondary market go for anywhere from $750 to $850. So that's roughly what you're looking at. Take all that information with a grain of salt. It can be all over the place, right? You may be able to get these for, down towards 1,000, maybe 1,100 if we're going for, if there's a more basic version of this. And, you know, little things like, you know, marble carbon fiber, I say little things, but if you're looking at a marble carbon fiber version and a more aggressive grind with similar materials or a more exotic grind, then it might be more towards the $1,300 mark, right? It's hard to say. Truthfully, it's hard to find pricing information on these guys. Anyways, thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. If you are enjoying the daily knife content on this channel and you'd like to support me too, you can find a link for my Patreon right down in the description. Get your hands on some cool stickers and other benefits. And please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. This is what I would call a pocket brick, and it's cool. It's this big. You know what's funny? This is nowhere near their biggest model. The S90 is kind of on the smaller side, or maybe medium range size, right? It's not an incredibly long knife. It's just a tall, fat boy. Coming in at 7.25 inches if we're going right to the tip of that backspacer. 7.75 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at, well, geez, if we're going to measure right to the scale, maybe just shy of 3.25. And then your cutting edge is coming in at about 2.75 inches overall. How crazy is that, right? It looks gigantic. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The Rat 1's obviously longer, but honestly, the Rat still looks like a tiny knife in comparison. This looks like a folding killer whale. That's exactly what it looks like to me. 8.6 inches overall on the Ontario Rat Model 1. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco Para 3? Spyderco Para 3 is coming in at 7.25 inches overall. I believe the cutting edge is actually fairly similar. Yeah, cutting edge is fairly similar on these two guys. This has obviously got a large forward choil. And then last but not least, the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. Mini Griptilian coming in at 6.75 inches overall. How's the action on this guy? This is running on bearings, and I believe they are ceramic bearings. It is completely and totally false shut. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're looking at about 190 thousandths on the spine, right? It's a big, heavy blade, but it is very, very smooth. There's no bumpiness in the action, right? It does feel incredibly smooth. That's, you know, absolutely a product of this, you know, being something that has extra hand elements in it. There's a difference between false shut action on a knife that's just false shut because they've got everything kind of nicely lubricated and it's a fairly heavy blade, right? You can get false shut action on just a standard production knife, but there's a little bit of, I don't know, there's a little bit of maybe bumpiness or grittiness, and then in a lot of less expensive knives, you can tell that it's more reliant on the weight and mass of the blade, right? In this case, I think we've got some extra polishing, some extra, you know, attention and work that has gone into it to ensure that it does that. But the action falling shut is incredible. What I'm really impressed with is, truthfully, looking at these, you know, I thought it's going to be running on some big old fat phosphor bronze washers, right? The last time that I had given Direware a look was back when I kind of, you know, was getting into the really, really upper end of this knife world, or at least this custom tier back in about 2013. And I just assumed that, and I can't remember why I thought that, because obviously, I mean, this seems like a newer one. This seems like a more modern one. I don't know what they were doing back in 2013. Maybe my opinion of the action was based on an old washer setup and an old pivot setup in these knives, right? Maybe they weren't using bearings back then. I would love to be able to explain all the different generations and changes that these types of knives have gone through, you know, since then. But I'm unable to. I can't find detailed history on this stuff. It's kind of shadowy. But anyways, I assumed that the action would be tight, like a Medford. But no. The flipping action is, I mean, this flipper tab protrudes quite a ways. It is definitely, you know, what people are going to refer to as a pocket picker. But this area down here is nice and smooth. The flipper tab is nicely knocked down. Very, comfortable, actually, to do a light switch. And it rockets out into place, makes a really satisfying noise. Detent's nice and heavy, so you can hear the distinct break of the detent, and then the impact of these massive external stops against the titanium frame back here. I'll let you guys listen again. Oh, boy. It's really satisfying to flip, and it really throws the senses off. Because of how big and chunky this thing is, you just don't expect it to be so graceful. There's no double clutch. You can easily just, I mean, as you can see there, I don't need my index finger to push on the blade. You can just, it's pretty satisfying. It's pretty satisfying. Absolutely. And honestly, the tension on the lock bar isn't crazy. You'd think that there'd be an enormous amount of tension here. No, I can easily move that out of the way with one hand. Let's go ahead and talk about Carry Pro. Actually, no, let's do a hardware check here real quick. Get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them down in the description. All of the hardware is massively oversized here. In fact, I think the handle screws are actually bigger than the pivot. I think the pivot is a T10. We're going to check that here real quick. I like that there's not proprietary hardware on this guy. Yeah, so the pivot is a T10. Oh, we could give it a little bit of a turn there. How's the action now? Oh, yeah, still falls shut. Okay. Pivot's a T10. And, okay, no, all the hardware is T10. All of it. All the way around. That's pretty cool. Now, for a second, I was like, what are these two screws up here? They actually hold the pocket clip in if you want to carry this tip down, which is, if you want to do that, I guess. But yeah, you've got options. You've got an option to switch the pocket clip to a tip down carry position. I just am not used to pocket clip screws being that big. But yeah, you've got a floating stop pin right here, and then you've got two screws with Chicago ends that hold in the backspacer. And yeah, it's minimal hardware, and everything's going to be easily. Honestly, disassembly of this guy would be unbelievably simple. Everything is so big, so it's so easy to see exactly what you're doing. The heads of the screws are large and they're deep, right? So it's just not going to be a problem. That's nice. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. This isn't quite as thick as I think some people might expect it to be, right? It is definitely thick. I mean, let's be clear about this. It's thick. You've got contoured titanium scales. It's definitely thicker than the Para 3. But we're not talking Medford Praetorian thick. I'm going to guess this is the case with a lot of companies that make these overbuilt knives. They have a lot of varying sizes of, overall length and thickness, but they probably have varying, maybe as the knives get bigger, right, or smaller, you can probably get varying thicknesses of the knife within each model, right? So they probably have like a massively, I'm going to guess they have a crazy thick version of this. Maybe they've got a little bit of a thinner version of this. And then the giant one, whatever that's, I know they had like the Hyper 90, and then they had like the oh god, I mean, honestly, you can check out the entire model list on their website. It's just hard to memorize all of this information. They probably have varying thicknesses. I think this is pretty standard. 190 thousandths, right, and then maybe 140 thousandths or so on the titanium, something like that. It's definitely thick. It's definitely heavy. Taking a look at the inside, you can get my flashlight down in the description. No milling. That is solid titanium, which, honestly, I kind of appreciate the novelty of that in a knife like this. I'm taking a look at this for what it is, right? It's obviously designed to be a big, chunky beast, and they did that, right? So the milling, right, some people, I'd like it to be a little lighter. Sure, but I kind of appreciate that it's not. They just went for it, man. I'm okay with that. Let's do carry profile up against the Spyderco Para 3 and PM2, two knives that have awkward carry profiles and nobody ever really complains about. Godly, this thing's a camera hog. Yeah, look, this thing is not quite as long as the PM2. It's definitely taller. Like, massively tall, wide, thick, heavy object in the pocket. There's no getting around this. It's not going to be a comfortable thing to carry. There's always going to be people claiming, I carry knives like that in my athletic shorts. Well, I hope your pants don't come down, I mean, this isn't a knife that most people are going to find comfortable to carry, even if they are used to carrying full-size knives or wearing jeans. What's the weight on this guy? It's at least 8 ounces, 8.5, maybe 9. Yeah, 8.29 ounces. This is a thick boy, for sure. Absolutely. Way too big. Well, not too long, but way too thick, way too wide, way too heavy for the vast majority of people to carry comfortably on a day-to-day basis. Excuse me, I got excited and I moved my background a little bit, so we got to put it back. It's just not going to be something. Now listen, if you're used to carrying like overbuilt knives or just heavy knives, right? Maybe if you work outside all the time and something like 8.3 ounces just isn't a big deal in relation to the other stuff that you might be carrying or have carried in the past. Maybe for you, this isn't that big of a deal. But seriously, for the vast majority of people, including myself, this is too much weight. I very rarely say that on this channel. This is something that I might enjoy to, enjoy showing to people, right? It's a nice conversation piece. I don't doubt that it can actually be used, and honestly, there's a lot of joy and comfort that comes from the ergonomics here. We're going to talk about that. I'm sure that it can be used. But for me, I kind of cap out at about 6.5 ounces before I really start to notice it. And so this is way over that line for me, but you're going to have to judge it how you will, right? Did we go over everything? We did not talk about blade stock thickness. Let's go ahead and measure that real quick just to be sure. Blade stock thickness on the Direware S90 is coming in at, yeah, 190 thousandths. So there you go. You're talking, that's XM24 thickness, your 8020 thickness, right, from Demco. Your Medford 187s and Praetorian H, right? That's kind of where the really overbuilt stuff kind of starts. That's generally the thickness that you're looking at there. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy here. Like I said, this knife comes in a lot of different, finishes and blade forms, and they've got polished blades, they've got tumbled blades, they've got two-tone blades, DLC blades, right? Everything you'd expect. On top of that, I've seen insane recurves, I've seen drop points, right? A lot of different options. Same thing with the titanium scales here. Now, GP Knives lists a similar finish as tumbled, but truthfully, we have something different going on here. This looks like a combination between bead blasting and tumbling, and honestly, there's a little. Initially, I thought, is this like eggshell? There's no texture to it. It's just, it's very smooth to the touch, but it has this kind of, I don't know, it has this showroom floor kind of look to it. If you've ever gone into a really, really nice dealership and you take a look at the floors, right? It's like high polish on concrete, right? That's what this looks like. It's really nice. And these are contoured too. This is beautiful. All of the edges and corners nicely knocked down. Even the areas that do have jimping, it is not aggressive. Nothing on this knife is incredibly aggressive except the pocket clip. I'll tell you what, listen, ergonomically, truthfully, if the pocket clip wasn't here, this thing would be holding it in my left hand so that I can feel this smooth contoured surface, right? This is actually really comfortable. Choking up, absolutely. Placement of the jimping, oh God, it melts into your hand. This pocket clip is ridiculous. I mean it, it's ridiculous. It's way too thick, way too big. Now listen, I'm talking about, from the perspective of somebody who's going to go out and use it. And truthfully, while there are people who do, I would guess, one of those people is right here in our own neighborhood. I know Dirk Werning probably has some Direwares, and I bet you anything he goes out and uses them. But for the vast majority of people, right, even the people who chase this thing down and buy one, they're probably not going to be using it as much as some of the other knives floating around, right? I don't know. But safe to say, as knives get more expensive, that is generally the case. It's ridiculous to assume nobody does. Whenever people say that in my comment section, like, nobody's actually... No, it's not true. It's not nobody. It's some people. There's always some people, for sure. But most people know. But yeah, the pocket clip is just ridiculous, right? But it does go with the theme of the knife. It is massively thick and overbuilt, and it's got its own shape, but oddly enough, it does fit with this knife. Whether it's in the tip up or tip down position, it does fit with it, right? So, truthfully, I like how the pocket clip looks, and, as far as carry goes, there's really not that much of the knife sticking up out of your pocket in relationship to what's in your pocket, right? But as far as how it feels in the hand, I would say this is the single most hot spotty clip that is ever. This is the most uncomfortable clip in hand that I've ever felt. Right, but again, I don't want to judge it too hard on that, because the person who made this knife, obviously, if they wanted to, if their goal was to make this absolutely as ergonomically comfortable as possible during use, they easily could have done that. The rest of the knife is indicative of, you know, this person's ability to create these types of things, right? They made perfectly ergonomic lines and everything else. The pocket clip was clearly just the cherry on top of the design, right? They could have put something really boring and flat if he wanted to. I say I think, if he wanted to, but he didn't. He went all out, went crazy. All right, cool, that's fine. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the blade here. So we have a massive flat on this. Like I said, we've got a compound tanto, kind of a stub-nosed. I really like how this blade looks. It's so short and thick. Flat that carries out about 80% the length of the blade. Plenty of material out here. No worries of durability on this tip, right? Two-tone, we've got the DLC and satin finish. What's the blade steel? It's M390. It's not going to say anywhere on the blade, but it is M390. They've used S90V, S110V in the past. I imagine they used to use S30V, right? I mean, your stainless powder steel seems to be the steel of choice, or the steels of choice for this maker. These are made in the United States, by the way. Exactly where, honestly, I don't know. I couldn't find that information out. I know you guys oftentimes want a lot more information than this, but it is just difficult, you know. Anybody who has additional information on this knife, right, that if you want to fill in the gaps for me, feel free, you know, down below. Really what I like to do on this channel is just kind of like to comb over it and feel it out and, you know, give my thoughts on the design itself, rather than give you guys a history lesson, right, unless it's incredibly important, or if the information is more accessible, right? But anyways, here's the crazy thing about this blade, right? I'm sure people are going, oh my gosh, way too thick behind the edge. There's no way it could possibly. This thing legitimately comes to a razor thin edge down here. This is an aggressive hollow. Can you see this? Up here, you can see how aggressive this is. This is insane how thin it actually gets, right? Now, you're still going to be working against the thickness of the flat on the spine as you come up here, right? But even on this flat ground right here, I mean, it's insane how quickly this tapers. You see this? Wild. Is this a double hollow? I think they're both hollow. Honestly, I think this is hollow up here, too. So we've got a less aggressive hollow grind. That's what it looks like. Gosh, it's hard to tell. Less aggressive hollow grind up here, more aggressive down here, but it does get nice and thin. Oh gosh, that's crazy. Love external stops. Can you use them as a deployment method? I'm going to say no. Ow, don't do that. Use the flipper tab. It works much better. The flipper tab protrudes quite a bit. It doesn't really bother me, right? It's going to bother some people if you carry other stuff in your knife pocket besides your knife, right? Then definitely. But yeah, it's been knocked down, and they did the two-tone thing to it too, so that's cool. This one has a backspacer. I believe I've seen them periodically with standoffs. I imagine you have a lot of different options for the backspacer as far as the finish goes. This one is in kind of a satin finish titanium. I kind of like how that looks. The contrast is kind of neat, right? Especially when when the blade's out and you've got the satin finishing on the blade. Kind of looks nice. Love the oversized hardware. I absolutely love it. It's nothing special, right? I mean, I think these are screws that, are available. They're production screws. They're not. I don't think these are custom-made screws or anything like that. But I do like that they're oversized. I appreciate that. And that they are not proprietary. I also like the little dots here, right? We've seen that on, Quiet Carry. Direware has been doing this for a long time. I'm not saying, like, Quiet Carry copied Direware because they put dots on their... No, it's just a way to break up, I think, otherwise the totally blank canvas that this knife or the scales would be, right, if they didn't have them on there. Kind of like how that looks, but from what I've seen, there's a ton of different variations of how these scales can come in, right? This side, much the same as the front. We do not have a steel lock bar insert or over travel stop, but here's the thing. You don't need an over travel stop because the pocket clip essentially is that. There's so much material here. There's no way you're gonna bend it. And yeah, it absolutely works as an over travel stop. The pocket clip itself. You are not. There's no amount of human force you could apply to this to bend out both. You'd have to bend out both the clip and the titanium frame lock. No way. This is going to be a carbonized titanium lock face, which is fine. You don't need a steel lock bar insert. Look at the surface contact on here. The lockup geometry is great. This one's locking up at about 45% or so, which is perfectly acceptable. There's no blade play up, down, left, or right. And there's no lock stick either, not a hint of it. The blade is also perfectly centered. Fit and finish all the way around is fantastic. I have no issue with any of this. This is right up my alley, right? I mean, here's the thing, guys. $1,200, somewhere between $1,100 and $1,300, right? That'll buy you a lot in today's knife world. That's going to buy you a very, very nice full custom knife. Absolutely. This, at base, is M390 and titanium. It has a, it's got a very specific appeal to it. This knife appeals to somebody like me who likes more of a, excuse me, I'm still moving my mat around, who likes more of a plain aesthetic, who likes, if I was going to spend a lot of money on a knife, truthfully, as much as I love Damascus and mirror polishes, truthfully, me personally, I would go for something monstrously overbuilt and kind of simple, right? I would, probably a lot of the money that I would spend would go into, a very interesting grind or, polishing on the scales with something like orange peel or eggshell. I really like that, right? Some interesting texturing. I don't necessarily need I don't need the marble carbon fiber inlays or the lightning strike or the, the gold flake or anything like that. I'm not really into that. I kind of like how Damascus looks, but honestly, I might go for something like this, right? So, can you get M390 in titanium for $200? Sure. Is it the same thing as this? No! No! Not even close. Sorry. No! There's nothing, it's not comparable at all. There are, obviously there are elements here that indicate some CNC work, but this is largely a handmade knife. And it is made in the United States. I'm going to guess this is a very small operation. This is not something where they're pumping out tons of these, right? So a lot of that has to, that's going to be, you have to figure that into the price. I think if you if you decide to go with a custom order, you're probably going to be waiting a bit. It's hard to say because I couldn't get a hold of this person. But I do like this. I do think it's cool. I think $1,200, you really have to want this, right? You really have to want exactly this style of knife. But if you're going to do a custom order, right, then maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say, is it worth it, is it not worth it? It's going to be worth it for some people, right? You're going to pay, just factually, you're going to pay more money for a full custom knife because they cost more time and energy and, it takes more, way more to make this than a $200 production knife using the same materials, right? So, it's up to the individual. You can find these on secondary. So, similar to these, like I said, between $750 and $850 in good condition. Do with this information what you will, right? If you you guys got to remember this. If you came into this video knowing that there's, you never had any interest in buying a knife like this or spending that much money on a knife, right? Then, complaining about it kind of goes out the window. If you're somebody who regularly purchases knives like this in this price range, you've handled a ton of stuff, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500, right? Different makers, different styles, different grinds, different materials, right? Then okay, it's easier to weigh in on that. It's I'm not saying people are excluded. Some people are excluded from giving their opinions. Absolutely not. You can always give your opinions, but just consider where it is you're coming from, right? This simply will appeal to some people, and it's not going to appeal to others. In fact, the vast majority of us, this isn't going to be appealing just because it's so expensive. Is it cool? Absolutely. It's absolutely cool. Very, very cool. I do like how this looks, how it feels, right? Fit and finish is on. Nothing ugly here. There's nothing wonky or goofy, right? It's a cool knife. Absolutely. that's really all that I can give you guys. I wish I could give you more on the history and the options and, you know, more information in general. Like I said, I'll list Direware knives down below. Right now, I think the only one that's available at the time of this video through GP Knives is the Tail Whip, which looks a little bit, you know, it's a little slimmer. It's probably a more pocketable Direware. In fact, it looks like their most pocketable option. So you can check those out if you want to. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.